Hello, my name is Macy Stuckwish. I am a part of group number 4. So my teammates are Patrick, Alexis, Katie, Natalie, and myself. We worked on, our choice was gender for our essay, and so we specifically chose women in agriculture. So why did we choose this? We thought about the subject and thought that we had large options when looking, since we had to choose a topic related to COVID and how COVID affected it. So we thought there was a lot of options whenever looking into gender. We also thought that women had a large topic in agriculture already. So women being in agriculture already has a large effect since agriculture tends to be a man's world, and so we thought we could definitely write about that. And finally, a lot of the people in our group are women. We only have one man on our group, so we thought we could all relate in our own way to discussing women in agriculture. So for my immersion activities, I did 3 YouTube videos, 1 documentary, and 3 TV shows. Particularly the one part of the immersion activity that I found the most interesting and learned the most from was from watching Farm Her. So Farm Her is a woman in agriculture who goes around to different agriculture businesses and companies and discusses how the women who run them how they are affected in agriculture, and it really promotes those different companies and businesses that the women have and really goes into detail into how they're affected being a woman in agriculture and definitely highlights the women and their businesses. So I learned quite a lot from that I will definitely be taking over to our paper. For my service learning project, I did a promotional flyer for the summer internship at Premier Ag. Within the flyer, I did discuss the objectives of the internship. I included the deadline and some contact information that you can see at the bottom. Premier was definitely very grateful for me to create this for them so that they can have a little bit something different than what they typically do for their promotion for this internship, and I hope that this will be successful for them, that they can promote it and use it as a different tool than they typically use so that they can hopefully have a little bit more engagement with their internship program and potentially have more women apply for their internship. So learning and applying. So what did I learn from all of this? We definitely dug deeper into compensation, gender roles, and outreach, and then the effects that COVID-19 had on women in agriculture. And so with all of this, I learned quite a bit. I definitely didn't realize quite as much about how women make less money in the field, how their quote-unquote gender roles are affected a lot, especially during COVID-19. Women were faced with their children were out of school, so they had to worry about taking care of their kids more, feeding, cooking, all the different things that goes into being a mother, specifically were increased because they had to watch their own kids from home. They had to do their work while also keeping their kids online, doing their schoolwork, and just different things like that. Men in agriculture didn't quite have that effect quite as much based on the research that we found. They pretty much got through COVID a little less unscathed in the gender role category. Also, the outreach we looked into. The outreach itself for women in agriculture definitely seemed to be affected during COVID because the outreach typically was to a certain extent, but during COVID that came down because people weren't in the office, they weren't meeting people nearly as much, and so the outreach just overall diminished. And then how did I apply it for this? I'll be applying it to the essay as a whole for my portion that I'll be writing, as well as assisting in editing and helping my teammates work on their parts of the essay. And then also I took this information from my service learning project to hopefully be able to phrase things that are on the flyer that I created for them for Premier Ag so that hopefully it could be a little bit better for them and have a better outcome. So my assumption prior to this project was that COVID-19 affected everyone in agriculture equally. Later to find out it wasn't quite as equal as I thought it was. It seemed to have a little bit more effect on women than it did on men, but it could be argued either way. And then the research articles, this again, we discussed how COVID-19 affected gender roles, compensation, and outreach. Pretty typical for the everything research-wise that we've done across the board. Definitely looked a lot more into the gender roles than any other option. Some of my teammates looked more into the outreach and into the compensation, but we did have a definite look over all three. And then finally, we had learning from each other's immersion experiences. So we definitely had a good discussion over how everyone worked together on their different immersion activities, and then the knowledge that we got from that we're going to incorporate into our essay as our main focus for different parts of our essay. So that's all I have today. So I will pass it on to the next person to finish out our presentation. Thank you.
Patrick Morris, and I will be going over my Hello, my name is Patrick Morris, and I will be going over my service learning project. For my project, I went to a food bank. It's actually the day before Thanksgiving, and I did this because Dr. Philimizu Malu, I'm not gonna try to pronounce it, but so what did I intended to achieve? I intended to understand the demographics of the recipients of this food. I was hoping that most of them would be women, and I was just hoping that'd help, or that's how it should be. And if it wasn't giving out to a lot of like single mothers and stuff, I was gonna convey a lot of my research on this project to one of the staff members. So that's what I intended to do. It didn't end up that way. I did achieve, I packaged a lot of Lucky Charms into these huge bags you see up there, and I got to give back to my community. But what I didn't expect was when I asked these workers, do you know where this food goes? And they said, we don't really know, we just give it to the food bank or the kitchens and stuff like that. I was like, it's kind of profound, that's not what I was expecting, but when I thought more and more about it, while packaging these Lucky Charms and thinking about how all of this affects my community, I was thinking it's not really my place to tell them where the food should and shouldn't go, because you don't know what type of needs. If someone's going to these places to get food, you don't know why they need it. It's not like everyone's needs are the same, and it's not good if we say this amount of food has to go to women, because that could be taking away some of the food from some of the people that actually need it in their circumstance. So I decided it was probably best that these food banks don't really know where their food is going. They just know it's going to people that need it, whatever that situation may be. So, yeah, a lot of my input that I thought would be useful at the beginning of this immersion experience actually did not come that influential, but that does not mean that did not change my perspective, which I think is equally as impactful, if not more. And just to highlight what I was saying on the last slide, we just cannot objectively define needs, and it's really hard because I think most people do want to genuinely see the demographics struggling, get the resources they need, but you cannot take away these resources from the people that still need it in whatever circumstance that may be, whether it's being homeless for 15 years, or you're trying to find a new job because you just got laid off, or you got evicted and for some random reason your landlord's a jackass or bad. And that's kind of why I took the picture in front of the truck, is because hunger is not an option, so we can't just split it between demographics. And it's hard because we do want to see it getting to the people struggling the most within the system. But yeah, I learned a lot in this immersion project, and it's definitely going to affect my overall input in the entire cultural immersion project. So yeah, thank you for listening, and here's the next presenter.
Hello, my name is Katie, and I am in CIP Group 4 with Alexis, Patrick, and Macy. For our project, we decided to focus on gender roles, and specifically women's roles in the agriculture industry and how they are discriminated against. And we started our research with 3 questions relating to how women are deterred from jobs in the agriculture field, how their salaries compare, and why they are likely to enter into the field. We decided to mainly focus our research on why they aren't likely to enter into the field, and we also wanted to think about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected this. In order to kind of direct our research in the right direction, we decided to focus mainly on how the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected women's compensation, gender roles, and outreach within the agriculture industry. I decided that I thought researching gender roles, specifically women's roles in agriculture, would be a really interesting topic to learn more about, because I wanted to learn more about it, obviously, because I am a woman who will be entering into the agriculture industry, and I have also noticed a lot that women aren't really recognized in the agriculture industry. For my immersion activities, I did a lot of research before choosing which activities to look more into. There aren't a lot of documentaries that are out there about women's roles specifically in agriculture, because a lot of them haven't been fully funded in order to produce an entire movie. I did find a few YouTube videos that were really insightful, and some shorter documentaries that aren't really put out onto like streaming services. I found several videos that kind of talked about the same thing, relating to closing the gap between women and men in the agriculture industry, meaning their ability to gain resources and more education and their compensation. I found some YouTube videos that were of women specifically talking about their own experiences as women farmers and landowners, and how they have experienced sexism or discrimination in the agriculture industry. I also read a few articles and blogs from women who talk about their experiences, and I thought it was really insightful to read and hear from older women who have been experiencing it a lot longer than we have, our generation. I also stumbled upon a show called Farm Her. It is a series started by a photographer who was traveling around the country photographing women who owned farms and owned restaurants and shops, and it eventually turned into a documentary. And I actually watched a few episodes not expecting to watch more, but I did finish it, and it was probably one of the most amazing things I've ever watched. And I learned a lot from all of the different stories of all the women and it changes your mindset about a lot of things. And they also shared their experiences with discrimination in the agriculture industry as well. When I first started researching, I expected to find a lot of information about this topic, and I was surprised to actually struggle finding journals and blogs and YouTube videos and documentaries about it. Prior to this project, I would have just assumed that it's a common topic that people are aware of, and it's not, and a lot of people aren't actually aware that women are discriminated against in the agriculture community. I learned a lot from doing all of my research for our annotated bibliography, and from watching documentaries and YouTube videos and reading blogs, and also from our interviews that we had to conduct. I chose to interview someone from the Indiana Farm Bureau, which I also didn't even know that that was anything other than insurance. So I met with the district leader from the Women's Leadership Committee, who represents Delaware County, which is where I currently live. And she also brought in the chairperson for the Women's Leadership Committee to help me answer my questions. And I learned so much from those two women that I will forever hold with me in my future career and finishing school. They told me a lot about their own experiences with discrimination in the agriculture industry and how they are pushing to give women the confidence to speak out about their own stories and speak in front of legislators about important topics in the agriculture community that need to be talked about. I am planning on keeping contact with these two women and hopefully attending one of their workshops one day so that I too can learn the things that they tell these women to help them and empower them. And one of the women that I talked to, the chairperson, Isabella Chisholm, she said, "Empowered women empower women." And I think that that's a quote that I will always remember. From the information that I found from my experiences in my immersion activities and my interviews, to compare them back to my annotated bibliography, there were a lot of comparisons. In both of my articles for my annotated bibliography, they talk about how women are undercompensated and underappreciated. All of these facts were confirmed when I did my interviews and my immersion activities. I was able to make those connections between my original two annotated bibliographies that we had to kind of jumpstart our research, and as I've done more of these activities, I've just furthered my knowledge about the roles of women in agriculture. I specifically learned a lot about outreach in the agriculture community from the two women that I interviewed for my interviews, and I will be able to provide a lot of insight about outreach just from the research that I have done. I think all of the information that we found and the research that we did will really help us pull together a paper that is clear and understanding and really just confirms our initial assumptions and answers all of our questions, especially.
For this interview, I decided to interview my mom. I decided to interview her because she is a very influential person in my life and is one of the main reasons for joining agriculture. She works in the agricultural field and is one of the only women in high position in her company. Here are the interview questions. Number 1. Have you experienced or witnessed sexism within the agricultural industry? Yes, I have experienced sexism within the industry. In ag specifically, men are mostly the people running a farm or being head of business. So being a woman in the industry, you do experience some sexism, but I definitely think that it is getting better with the new generations coming into ag. Number 2. How do you see women's role in agriculture changing in the future? I definitely see women becoming more involved within the next few years. Already there are a lot of women running farms and ag businesses, which is very important, but within the next few years, I definitely see women becoming more involved and more influential in the industry. 3. How do you see women's role in ag today? I think having women in ag today is very powerful, and I love seeing the ways that we have influenced future generations to go into ag. Ag isn't a man's world like a lot of people think it is. There are so many women that are running businesses and big farming operations, and I think that little girls seeing that is so very important for them to witness and know that they can do it as well, no matter what the world tells them. 4. Has COVID affected the way that you reach out to women interested in the ag community? Yes, I think that it did affect the way we reach out to people. We were socially distanced for a long time, and during that time, we couldn't talk to people about ag. We couldn't give them the experiences that they wanted. So yes, COVID did affect the way we reached out, but also COVID allowed us to figure out new ways to talk to people and to simulate the experiences. So while there were downsides, there were also upsides to it. We learned a lot about how we could roll with the punches and figure out the new ways of doing things.